Hello and welcome to the BuddySpoiler Podcast. I'm the Night Shadow, and today we have two guests. Please introduce yourself.
I am the ExaltedEin. Recently won the regionals in Richmond with my team.
So I am just HeroGirl, and I'm actually one of the moderators over on the Buddy North America trade group. My primary roles involve updating the trade document with the recommendations that people leave after they successfully foreign trades or purchases with other members, and I also police for timestamps.
All right, so the main reason I have both of you here is because this past regionals, April 21 to 22, for those who don't know, was a little bit interesting because we had HeroGirl join us as a guest from outside BC. So we brought you on to talk about how it was, because you haven't attended our regionals before. You have gone to regionals before, right?
That's a loose definition. I've gone to Bushy Red regionals before, but it's always been for it's always been with Vanguard as kind of the bonus itinerary, but it's usually been primarily for Weiss Schwartz. The Indiana Regional of 2017 Fall Circuit was the first, I think, full regional I actually got to play Buddy Fight in, which makes this my third Buddy Fight regional. The first one that I played in was, I believe, in the spring, and that was before they actually introduced the round robin the Swiss format for regionals. So I went 0-2 and felt incredibly cheated because I so very rarely get a chance to play structured Buddy Fight that it basically felt like I wasn't at a tournament at all. I was there to brick twice and go home sad.
So how did I guess with even considering the Vanguard one that you've been to, how was this regional compared to the other ones that you've been in?
It's very hard to quantify the differences between the two because they essentially had different formats. The Indiana regional that I went to was fantastic. I started with the round one bye because of the shop challenge system that they had just implemented, but I still had a full 5 or 6 rounds of match playing, and even then it was, I don't want to say it was handy. Every one of those games actually felt incredibly not stressful, but there was definitely a hurdle and a challenge to clear with each one of those. But I did get to a point where I could get my win in and basically guarantee top 8. With this one, because you essentially cut the attendance to a third of what you would normally have with the team event, it was a much shorter round, and we kept advancing despite the fact that I kept losing. So it was a very paradoxical feeling of, okay, I'm glad we made top 8. I'm glad that we managed to get ourselves into a position where we can still compete for that top spot. But at the same time, it feels incredibly unsatisfying because I kept losing on my end. I lost our top 8 match. I got wrecked by Mr. Exalted here. So it was a very unsatisfying tournament in terms of my personal play, but I'm satisfied that we were able to accomplish something despite that.
Okay, that makes sense. And I think that just goes to talk about what we talked about the last time, which was just the whole dynamic between the team format and a regular format. And I think we'll cover that in a little bit. I do want to get to ExaltedEin and how it was for him. Would you mind talking about what you played and what your experience was?
Not a problem. So I was playing Chaos Plague. Plague being the main thing. The buddy was Chaos Ursinius. It was fun. There was a couple decks that I wasn't quite used to, so I kind of ran into a couple hurdles early on. I wasn't used to seeing Kaiserion, so that was interesting.
You saw Kaiserion?
Yep.
Nice.
That's a surprise to me too. Okay.
Yeah, it was good though. I like versing different decks because it helps me kind of see where I'm at as far as strategy goes with my deck, because I know that's a type of deck that can hit for large damage pretty quickly. And with Plague, my whole goal is to balance my life, my gain, and my burn of the opponent, because I wasn't playing a strictly World Pandemic build, because I just didn't find it very effective. I did have Pandemic. There was 2. I only used it twice the entire day. And once it was countered by HeroGirl herself.
Yeah, because HeroGirl at least kept up with the TV show. That's the funny thing about this is that while you guys were actively practicing every week by going to locals, I had almost no practice coming after Indy. Because after Indy, I decided to mess around with like Battleship Satsuki and all that, but I would just keep getting killed by my one friend. And anything else resembling, the chance to play practice games kind of quickly disappeared or dissolved into I'm just dying on the first turn every time, so what's even the point? But at least I kept up with the show to at least have an idea of, okay, this is Plague deck. This is the deck that I've been hearing about. Oh, I have a counterspell. I guess I'll, hold this up for the win condition. But Exalted's deck was actually really cool because it reminded me of the harder control decks that I used to see a lot in Magic, which was, frustrating to play against. But at the same time, it's cool to see that there are still decks like that can exist.
Yeah, I very much agree. It was a really good call on your part to keep that counterspell in hand. I did kind of see it coming a little bit simply because I know Hero World and I've played Superhero once before, and that card's just a must-have. So I kind of gambled on that, but at the same time, I knew with the position I was in, it wasn't the end of the game if I didn't get it all.
No, it wasn't like the guy I was playing against in top 8, where his deck was all in on the World Pandemic, and when he did finally play it, he had like maybe 7 or 9 cards left in his deck. So he ended up just conceding to me that first game when I countered it, because we had eaten up so much time in that first game that he wanted to try and get back into it and not have the game just end 1-0 in my favor.
Yeah, that's actually kind of the other thing that I noticed is, so my teammates were playing Auto Deity Army and Prisms, Alexander build. And I noticed a lot of times by the time I was finished one game, they usually won, so we just advanced.
I want to blame my lack of practice on this, but it didn't help that I was taking a little longer to work through all my sequencing than I probably should have, because there are so many things to consider with a new deck, with a new build, with a new meta environment where everything that you're playing against is new. Most of my games, save for like rounds 2 and 4, ended up going to time, which incidentally is just every time I had to play against Plague.
I know, it makes sense to me that people are curious about my decks, and I know Plague can take a long time, and I'm always trying to, because it happened to me in top 8 as well, where somebody had never, she had picked up the game not too long ago. She was playing with her sister, and she was doing really well with Purgatory Knights, but every card that I had to cast, she had to stop and look at. That was something that I noticed happened a lot. The guys that came over, the Calgary guys, apparently only one guy in their locals had Plague, and he doesn't show up for locals.
Yep.
So they had no playtesting against it, and they had no idea how it worked.
The ironic thing is that apparently there's a small local group in my area. It's a little too far out for me to be able to drive out there, but it sounds like one of them actually made Card Academy Soccer Fest top with Plague. So if I'd been a little more diligent in actually showing up and play testing, it sounds like I actually would have gotten some good testing there.
In all of this, I think the only time that you mentioned that you took top spot was in your introduction, and I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, we ended up taking top spot. Towards the top 8 spot up, I did get a lot more victories for my team. It wasn't just me being carried through the entire day. The Purgatory Knights match was long. It ended up going 2 turns, and on the final turn 3 of it, I was able to pull off World Pandemic and swing for the last 4 damage to end the game before going into the 15-minute round.
Wow.
Yeah, my team was a little ecstatic because the Athora player had lost to a Starjack deck.
Yeah. I also heard that your team had a little interesting moment when both you and the Auto Deity player won their match, but the Athora versus Athora game was still in game one.
Actually, no, that's not quite true. So the situation was...
What happened there?
So it was... this was the second round. This is when I played up against Dual Jaeger Overturn, and I forgot Dual Jaeger Overturn was a thing, so I died first game. Second game, I came back, and I was able to grind out a victory. Third game, I've never bricked so hard in my life. But what happened was after that, so I had lost. Our Athora player had beat their Sun Dragon player, and there was a matchup between the two Auto Deity armies.
Oh, that must have been a different team then. I think because I definitely remember there was an Athora versus Athora thing who in table one. So that probably was the triple champion team that lost in top 8.
Yes. I know that there was a situation with them, but our situation was the Athora player was sitting close enough to the match going on between the two Auto Deity armies, and he kind of to himself, but a bit louder than he should have, noted that it was a misplay, or, well, not misplay, but a lack of ability of one of our player, and the other Auto Deity army called over the judge for coaching. I definitely understood that it was kind of, the situation was what it was. We ended up getting the round loss for it, which was a pretty hefty punishment in my opinion, but at the same time, you kind of just have to go with it. So my guys were a little upset, a little frustrated. I just calmed them down just because I knew if they didn't calm down and focus on the games, because once you make one misplay, if you're stressed out about that misplay, you're going to continuously think about it and make more, in my mind.
Yep.
And actually that carried on into our third match because the Swords player against our Chaos player made one mistake and then immediately made another mistake thinking about the mistake that he just made, which actually cost our Chaos player to win the round.
Incidentally, that was... Let's see. No, that couldn't have been...
Yeah, it was.
Was it? I thought you said it was... Oh, right, because Auto Deity Army is Chaos.
Sorry, Auto Deity Army.
Okay, yeah. No, it's perfectly fine. I just keep remembering Auto Deity Army as the evil bots army, and for some reason that keeps flipping it to Thunder Empire in my mind.
Understandable.
Yes, that was against HeroGirl's boyfriend.
Yep, our Swords player.
Yeah.
Which we will now refer to as literally Satan. It's better than reducing him to It's better than just reducing him to objectivity. But now, go ahead, Dan.
I was just going to say, I actually did play against an Auto Deity Army deck, and then I seriously was concerned about it, and then I ended up 2-0ing him right before top 8.
That
actually gave me huge boost of confidence before top 8.
And I'm glad you did end up taking it out, but having to play against two of those play decks back to back, like your deck was the harder control build, and that made it harder to actually get through. The problem with the other build though was that it was almost just pure life gain, and because I'm trying to play frills like a burn deck from Magic or just pure burst of damage, it made everything so much harder. Like, if I can actually do stuff against this build, but because he's just gaining all the life back, it also feels like I'm not doing anything, if that makes sense. Where my game plan literally becomes just trying to stall and deck him out, and I hate that.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate when your burst just does not
combat
the fact that he can life gain faster.
Yeah, in my mind, trying to hold out for a deck out win is not a real win condition. And it's basically saying, congratulations, you're literally not doing shit. And if this, you've for all intents and purposes lost this game, and the only way that you can win is by running out the clock, so you're basically shit.
That's not my style of victory either. That's why I kind of try and end
like
it
at least
times.
Yeah, because like at least you had like the burn for soul removal or like extra burn effects, and at least the destruction and the control leads to board clearing, which means that you can still apply pressure. Because like I can respect control decks. It's the stalling. I can't stand the stalling.
So I'm to take that you really hate turbo fog decks?
Turbo fog decks are incredibly annoying, but I think more so because they don't have really any other condition other than just straight milling out. Like the land control deck is probably one of the other examples. If any of the listeners are familiar with Magic, which I'm hoping at least most of them are, the turbo fog, the decks that literally just do nothing but stall, and you just sit there and you watch as they stall turn after turn. Like at least turbo fog, when it was in Innistrad Standard, had a win condition of I'm going to mill you 3 cards. So like that's really more of a super janky control deck that's trying to win by milling. I consider that a little different than just straight stalling out until you draw out.
Moving on a little bit, I do want to talk about your impression of the the triad format versus the singles format. What did you make of it, and are you okay, for example, with this format not going to Worlds?
On the one hand, I'm not a fan of feeling carried. I won we got into top 8 because I was able to beat my opponent in that last round. However, at that point, we were, I think, 1-2, probably playing against the scrub team, and it just didn't feel satisfying. Like the guy was playing Star Dragon Jack, but he didn't have but you could tell that he was a casual player. Like he had a decently built deck, but he was either newer or more experienced or a lot more casual. He didn't have a sideboard. So it really kind of felt like I was punching a 5-year-old. A 5-year-old that, at least knew how to play, kind of. I mean, and that's a mean way to put it, but when I first turn kill him in game 2, that's kind of what it amounts to, so it doesn't feel like an accomplishment. Since that was also like my only game win all day. So in terms of how it makes me feel, despite that we made top 8, despite the fact that I personally didn't do well, it's a personal feel bad. Like if I was going to go 1-3, 1-4 all day, I would have liked to have, had placements where I felt like I earned that. But I don't know. It's kind of tough to tell. Like we looked at and we got the bye round 1, so I only played 3 games before we made top 8. I already explained why that's not unfulfilling, but just the lack of games in general because of the smaller tournament bracket is also kind of unsatisfying because I traveled all the way across the country to enter this tournament with my boyfriend and our other friend and have a great time just kind of playing and jamming games. And there wasn't a whole lot of experience like that. Like 3-4 rounds is what I would do for locals. When I go to regionals, I'm kind of expecting a 6, maybe 7 round tournament before Top Cut. Kind of like back when I was playing and traveling for competitive Magic events. So in terms of that, I do still kind of prefer the individual tournaments.
Okay.
I'd probably feel a lot different though if I'd actually been winning and contributing though.
True. It hasn't been a week yet since then, so you're probably still feeling part of the effects of that.
All right. So I kind of agree with that. But I had a bit of a different experience as well. I didn't lose. I only lost once during the day, and that was against the dual Jaeger deck that I ended up beating in finals. So I didn't have that same lack of accomplishment feeling, but as before I had been, I made top 16 for Vanguard out of 140 people or so, which was a lot more of a grueling tournament. We did like 10 rounds. I can see where you're coming from with
winning fixes everything. That's the shorthand of it.
True. I will say, however, though, that I started at 10:30 a.m. and I didn't end till 8 p.m.
Yep. And honestly, having those longer experiences over the weekend like that, it's exhausting. It's emotionally and mentally draining. But God, by the end of it, you are just so raw with whatever it is you're feeling, whether it's disappointment that you lost or that you just topped, that it really feels a lot more. I don't know what the right word for that is. Resonant, maybe. It feels a lot stronger and a lot more.
Fulfilling?
Yes, that's the exact word. Because after my top 4 finish in Indy, I'd seriously misplayed. I'd made a misplay right after making some bad sideboard decisions, and the loss for that was particularly devastating because it already been a longer day. With the team event, there was still strong disappointment that we had just lost top 8, but because it was a much shorter event for us, it also didn't hit me as strongly. And I can say that I can absolutely say it's because of the length, because I made top 8 at a Vanguard team event a couple of years ago at a Chicago Spring Fest, and I want to say there was 5 rounds of Swiss. No, it wasn't 5 rounds. It was actually, it was 7 rounds. It was 6 or 7 rounds of Swiss. And by the end of that, we weren't expecting it to get top 8. But when we got our team number called, I shrilled so loudly in excitement that everyone in the room kind of turned their heads to see where the hell that noise was coming from. And it was so much more disappointing when we lost that top 8 because we had already spent so much time fighting.
That kind of investment, basically, emotional investment, shall we say?
Yes, an investment. That is exactly the term I'm looking for. The shorter the tournament, the less of an emotional investment you have at the end of it. Especially when it's a 13-team tournament, so only 5 teams are going to be excluded from it, so you really just have to avoid sucking rather than fight your way tooth and nail into that top 8. That's not to diminish the disappointment that everyone who didn't make top cut feels. It's actually pretty bad when you and someone else is 2-2, but they're the one who ends up bubbling instead of making it because your tiebreakers were great. Wink, wink, Exalted. But
I don't know what you're talking about. I have no idea.
Yeah, it's because it's a much smaller tournament. I think because of the region and the game itself, it's just that was what made the biggest difference for me.
I see. Now, I realize that our region, it doesn't exactly have the biggest numbers. I know that British Columbia is usually the lowest out of all of North America, sans Mexico. So I do recognize that we do have the least amount of people. However, there were a lot of buddy fighters who did not attend because they just couldn't find a team or just didn't want to find a team. And I think part of that does come into play here.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, definitely.
Yep.
The only reason I ended up showing up was because I finally got the weekend booked off because I booked it off a month ago. And I told the guy that was looking for teammates, I was like, sure, I'll join. And it's actually at Locals with the Athera player. And we're like, oh, we're both free. Sure, let's just join a team. That was literally all the thought that went into making our team.
And now you know the rest of the story. But no, I think that's actually a very good point on what's affecting the actual team compositions. But the other thing that to consider is not just, oh, people couldn't find a team or anything like that, because you can still show up and try and get an impromptu team. The judges will help try and hook you up.
Of course.
But it's also worth noting that I think, particularly in BC, that most of the players that play Buddy Fight also play a secondary game, or in this case, Weiss. You yourself were actually over it in Weiss, and so was a couple of the other stronger players that I would have had to watch out for. In the Midwest, most of the people who are very strong or competitive in Buddy Fight, their secondary game is Vanguard, so there's no conflict. They can go ahead and enter both, and unless they day 2 for Vanguard, should that be an option, they're going to be showing up on Buddy Fight. It's going to be a relatively larger tournament. It's going to be relatively more competitive. Not to say that BC isn't competitive, but there's just going to be a higher percentage of high-quality opponents.
That's true. That definitely was a factor. I did mention I was playing Weiss last time, so I guess that's not much of a secret. But if I was playing, for example, in Buddy Fight, then I probably wouldn't have lent my Chaos Ursinius to ExaltedEin.
This is true. So it's a good thing you didn't play. That card is insane.
Uh-huh.
That card won me no less than pretty much every game that I played, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of our main card now. That's the main size 3.
Yep, that was the Control Ursinius?
Yes.
Ugh, friggin' stupid.
Overkill, cast a spell, drain life, gain a gauge. Oh, it's just perfect.
And you get to grab whatever 3 spells you want. It's like, okay, you're playing Auto Deities. Here's Enigma Virus. Have fun.
Oh, yes. There is nothing quite as satisfying as at the start of an Auto Deity turn, you just say Enigma Virus, and they just look at you with such disdain that it just warms my heart.
I actually play tested with another Auto Deities player, helping them prepare for the tournament that day, and I triple Enigma Virus them. I got to go first. Turn 1 Enigma Virus. They're on play of their Gear God 1000. And then the next turn, another Enigma Virus, but they got out bots that turn. So during my turn, I also played another Enigma Virus in response to their bots. It was pretty stupid.
I love it.
So gross.
When I beat the Auto Deity player, all I did was spam and recap, like grab back to hand with Outbreak Enigma Virus.
Well, you grab back to hand the regular Chaos.
Yes, yes.
Regular Ursinius.
Yeah, sorry. Regular Ursinius to grab the Enigma Virus back so I could keep it going. And the Auto Deity player did not like that. The next time I versed him, he made sure that he had the counter Chaos card. I cannot remember his name off the top of my head now.
Which one?
The Ancient World counter. Lattice the Chaos.
Yes. The counter.
So he made sure he had Lattice the Chaos on field at all times against me.
Which doesn't technically matter because that's a activated ability. So if they play a card, you can just Enigma Virus in response and screw that.
Exactly. And I did that. He wasn't too happy about that. And then I proceeded to kill his Lattice continually.
Of course.
Of course. And penetrate damage, because that was key.
Yeah, well, yeah. So overall, would you say that I can't speak for both of you, and I can't obviously speak for the rest of BC, but can we generally say that this team tournament was its own interesting format, but we prefer singles?
I think if it's specifically the Vancouver region, then yes, I probably would prefer a singles tournament. But if it was Midwest, then I think going to teams is probably perfectly fine. In fact, I think I have plans to do the Ohio Regional at Origins Game Fair in June, so I'll be able to compare and contrast pretty soon.
Okay.
I would simply, I think the I liked the format because it's not something I'm used to with Buddy Fight. I'm used to it with Vanguard with the team tournament. It was a nice change of pace. I can't say I wouldn't prefer a single tournament, but it was a good experience. I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think if that tournament had more teams participating, I would actually prefer teams. In general, I tend to prefer teams just because it becomes a much more group experience as opposed to you and your friends, you all go to a tournament, but then you don't really get to see each other, especially if you don't have time between rounds.
Yeah, and if you're playing Chaos, you have no time, or Plague, you have no time except for finishing your match and then going on to the next.
Right. But then that's why you play Burn, so that you always make the lunch day special.
Yep.
Anyways, let's move on here. So the new season of Buddy Fight Ace is going to be announced to start in June and starring Gao's son Yuga. There have been quite a number of people speculating about Yuga's mother. Wow, how did I mess that up? Yuga's mother. I want to avoid that topic.
Yeah, especially since the official Facebook Buddy Fight page already said they know who Yuga's mom is, but they're not saying.
That's so baiting. Like, why do you do that? Anyway.
Because it gets people to actually comment on your post and boost the numbers.
It also increases
Apply the palm to your face. You will just feel better.
Apply directly to the forehead.
Oh, man. Anyways, outside of that, what are your expectations out of the season? And do you think anything good will come out of this?
Exalted, do you watch the show?
I do. I will not lie when I say that certain parts I skip past. There's certain parts that I'm more interested in than others. I tend to prefer the antagonist characters. Not so much the main characters as they were, because a lot of them kind of did the Dragon Ball Z thing of being side characters that would disappear for forever.
Yeah, you enjoying this season 4.5?
I liked the Ein vs. Chaos fight.
Oh, that was so good.
Beyond that, I don't really have too much positive or negative to say about it.
Yeah, like it's kind of it's a card game show. It's aimed at advertising some of the new cards like the kids that are going to watch it. You can have some fun with it. There's not, except for seasons like 100 Demons and the original, there aren't a lot of super deep parts. Actually, I really want to take a look at writing staff for a lot of these Bushiroad based shows are, because it seems like they start off really strong with some of these shows. Like the first season of Carpe Vanguard was great. I really loved the first 2 seasons of Buddy Fight because they actually shake up just things that get taken for granted in card game shows, like deck building and character development, and including other people and finding ways to showcase a lot of these new cards and rotate them in. Like a lot of these early seasons are great, and then they fall off. And at some point, they kind of creep back up, but then you don't really know if it's that they're getting back to where they want to be or what. If that makes sense. Like even some of the other ones, like Luck and Logic, Love Live, they're just it's so paper cutout. It's so this is just a thing to kind of advertise this product, and that's very disappointing, especially when you see the glimmer of the good stuff that is in those shows. Now, as far as a new season and kind of a I'm going to say a quasi reboot, because that's kind of what we're doing at this point. We're moving on to a new generation. We're pulling a Boruto after four seasons, where everyone's going to look at the show and look, okay, is this going to be good enough to become its new thing? Kind of like what Gohan was in Dragon Ball Z when we were finally getting to that point. Or is this just going to be a case of, wow, I remember back when I used to watch this show all about Yuga's dad. And with them already announcing that he's going to be a Dragon World main, it doesn't lend itself to a lot of confidence that's going to hold up to the quality that we to the fun and the quality that we kind of expected from the first two seasons. Because that was the thing that really got me into the show, was that there was a lot of fun to be had with like buddy skills and going around to not just different parts of the town, but other places in the world, finding out that there were literally things that are going on besides the actual card game, like power plays with the buddy police and corporate takeovers, police actually being involved a lot more, criminal activity being a little more pronounced, just really fun things to watch that weren't there when we finally got to Triple D and X. So I think if they were going to go back to some of the more, fun, character-driven aspects of the first two seasons, then this would actually turn out pretty well. If it's just going to be more, these are literally just vessels to advertise the cards, then we're going to have a problem. Because when Vanguard did it, I could actually get pretty invested into Team Tri-3 with Chrono and his friends, because they actually...
and Leo,
Shion.
Shion, thank you.
Yeah, Shion, and it's actually been a couple months since I've seen Vanguard. I need to catch up. Rin was another one I really liked from the show. They brought, even though that one was just an extension of the original series because they did bring back the old characters and old players, I could get invested into the newer characters because they did focus on building up their characters and building up the character relations first, even though it was weird to see them playing Vanguard but also not playing Vanguard. It would just be skip. It would just be skip to grade 3, get punched by Chrono Jet Dragon, and we don't know what happened, but we do know that Chrono just won a card game.
Okay. All right. So let me try this again. I think part of it can be attributed to the fact that Vanguard and Buddy Fight are aimed at two different age groups, and in all honesty, I don't think people of our age are supposed to be the main demographic of Buddy Fight.
Okay, but see, here's my counter argument. I can understand why aiming something at a younger demographic will result in, say, a lack of depth, quality, or anything like that. I can understand why that would be a factor, but my issue has always been that shouldn't be a factor. One of the things that I really got into about 5-ish years ago, I'm going to be a total girl here, but I really got into the My Little Pony reboot, and one of the reasons I did was because it had really good writing that made me want to go out and get some of the toys that I still have. And I remember back to, just people talking and analyzing some of the older cartoon shows, and some of the ones that really stuck out were the ones that had better writing. I'm of the opinion that, good solid writing and good character drama that can get you invested is a much stronger marketing ploy than just putting up, whatever's new, whatever's flashy, and trying to just, show people, hey, we got this thing. Like, one of the reasons that I really started getting excited into Buddy Fight was because I was watching the original show, and I was, I was never really that into Dragon World, but getting into Noboru, getting into his story, that made me think, oh wow, Dragon Knights would actually be a pretty cool deck to try. Or watching Kazane have a lot of fun playing with dungeon enemies and constructs and all that. That got me excited to, at least think about trying a Dungeon World deck. A lot of the attachment that you build to the characters is going to be your strongest marketing addition when you try and send out a product to whatever audience you're aiming at, regardless of age.
No, I completely agree with that. And I think if Triple D didn't bomb the way it did in Japan, I think it would have continued on the same way. But Triple D changed a lot of things internally. Like, the writer is no longer the same writer as before. The direction is no longer the same direction. Even the general director is not the general director anymore. So,
and it really shows, because a lot of the when a lot of the characters really did start becoming cutouts for their advertised world or deck or whatever. There was a lot of focus on characters that really didn't matter a whole lot, and it took away from the character drama. I was making a remark to my Swords boyfriend that if they hadn't, like, how much time did we just waste watching Ozombie, and how much time are we going to waste next week watching Ozombie that literally could have been put towards just, like, even a single line of dialogue can convey so much about a character, but you don't give yourself the opportunity because you're focused too much on slapstick that falls short because it's just so repetitive and unengaging.
Yeah, about that, most of that Ozone B stuff and the slapstick with the comic ball, that's all from the manga author.
Right, and that's exactly what I heard too. And it could have worked. The problem here is still the execution. Because it wasn't engaging, because it was repetitive and boring, it didn't grab you the same way that it could have. Like, the big reveal leading up to Ozone B is Cat's buddy and all that. Like, the building blocks were all there for it, but just there was no point. If you had cut out Ozone B from the entirety of that season, what changes? Almost
one fight.
Exactly, one fight and almost nothing. Instead, you get like maybe an additional 3 minutes an episode to flesh out someone's character. And that was a season where we introduced a lot of new characters. Daikaido is probably one of the only new characters that got introduced and fleshed out to the point of being an actual character. With the exception of, any Dragon World players that show up and, they're perennially homeless.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's a lot going on there, and I mean, like, I don't know if you've listened to us talk about this before, HeroGirl, but we went into this whole little diatribe of like what exactly there was the result of Triple D as just the cards themselves, not even talking about the show, as a result on the player base. Japan lost about 50% of their players throughout the entire season.
From what? Just you said the cards themselves, not just this show?
Not even about the show, just the cards themselves. Triple D bombed so hard that X was made the way it was because of Triple D.
Can you elaborate a bit more on that?
Sure. I'll probably provide a link in the doobly-doo to the previous podcast where we talked about it. But basically, just to sum it up, Abigail was really difficult for kids to deal with. Keep in mind that obviously Buddy Fight's marketed towards really young kids, younger than the Duel Masters age, and then really, really older adults that are out of the Vanguard age. So between those two spectrums, you have kids who were basically given cards from others, and then you have these adults who really like this engaging gameplay. And then you have this problem where it's mainly best of one in Japan, and there was no real best of three format type thing. And Abigail's Impact Monster was impossible for a kid to deal with. If you weren't playing Darkness Dragon World already, which a lot of kids didn't want to because they weren't a protagonist deck, you didn't really have an answer to it. There was no Fire Dragon Shield that went around and to everybody, because that was released in 100 and not in Triple D. And that compounded with Guardians and Executioners, where 2chan started talking about it, and then all the way to Zeta and that loop and all the fun stuff that came around with that. So it was just a progression of stuff, but it all started with Abigail in Triple D, and by the end of it, stores that were having 35 to 40 players ended up having only 15 to 20. So that ended up happening like at some of the more prominent stores in Tokyo, and that really, really hurt. So like if you look at X, right, and how bad it's been for the quote-unquote game, like a lot of the Westerners are complaining about it, and I frankly don't blame you guys. It has researched the buddy fight population in Japan, so there's that balancing act as well.
I thought you. Yeah,
sorry.
Go ahead, Exalted.
I was just going to say, I guess it is hard to try and balance between the two audiences. The players such as myself are looking for more interesting gameplay that's not a one-turn blowout, one shot, I can overkill and you die type playstyle, whereas the kids are not. I don't. I guess it is hard to bridge that gap, but I don't see how making it end before a game really starts is a good way to go about it. It seems almost now that if you have certain chaos decks, you can, as soon as you go on if you go second on your first turn, chances of you killing your opponent are quite high, depending on the deck that you're playing against. And I just don't see that as the good alternative to, change in the more complicated play style.
I think it was just too big of a pendulum shift in the other direction. Because prior to X, it was mainly control decks and combo decks that won. It was like heavy control early on. Like if you remember, Kaiserion and then Fifth Omni were both tier 0 during their time. And then combo decks that revolved around getting a specific combo ended up getting there in Triple D. So aggro had always been felt like super behind, and it didn't really help that a lot of the kids that played Dragon World just couldn't keep up because Sun Dragons really sucked.
Yeah, I kept expecting Sun Dragons to finally take off because of that main character affiliation, but it's just weird that they never did.
Yeah, Sun Dragons were just like a big swing and a miss, and a lot of the casual players that got into it because, hey, no matter what pack your parents buy, it's always going to have Dragon World in it. Well, unfortunately, the said Dragon World is not actually that good at all, and it felt really bad, especially because you have Ball Lariat, Ball Saucer, all of these, oh sweet, these cool super impact, and none of them compared to Abigail in Japan. And it's just okay, well, now what?
Yeah, I wasn't playing during that time. I actually picked it back up because I saw Oni Assassins. I was like, oh, that's neat.
Right. Triple D was I first started playing too. I think it was probably around the time the second main set was coming out that I finally had a deck, but I also didn't have tools. So the problem with my experience with Buddy Fight in general has always been I don't really have locals per se. I've got a couple of friends that I play with, but no one really representative of the meta unless one of the guys managed to flip some decks around and pick something off of the NA trade group. But when X season started, I was getting really frustrated with the first iteration of Thunder Empire that came out. But when I started talking to my Swords boyfriend about it, he said that no one was running Thunder Empire when it first came out just because the defensive power in the area was so strong. So a lot of my views on the meta has been really skewed, particularly because of the lack of exposure.
Mm-hmm.
Now with X season and here and now with the current regional going into it, my only experience again is literally secondhand. Oh, Auto Deity is tier 0 because it's way too consistent, and in Chaos, other builds are problematic, and there's Plague, and for some reason I keep hearing Toilet come up.
No jokes.
Yeah, Toilet Loop is the thing. Menjo. There's a lot of decks that you wouldn't necessarily expect right up front, but can just destroy your day.
Mm-hmm. I will say this though, that the past regional did get me really hyped and excited to start practicing more often. I'm planning on at least trying to make some time to get some practice games out of BFA or something going, kind of like when I first started. I might get to a point where I can record those games and do some editing, a la kind of like what Living Proof does for Spikes. I really am looking forward to seeing a lot of the decks that have come out since I kind of tapered off last year.
We have one question to go before we move on to our main topic, and it's kind of addressed the HeroGirl in a way.
Yes, I am a natural blonde, and let no one else tell you otherwise.
The question is, what does the Satsuki combo look like?
The Satsuki combo?
Yeah, I had mentioned in the last podcast that there was an effective combo that runs that basically gets a ton of attacks going, and they were wondering how to do a ton of attacks with Satsuki.
Let's see, I'm pretty sure the crux of that combo is Casablanca, isn't it?
Would you mind going further?
I wish I could. The problem is, part of not playing since last June when I made that top finish, it means I'm not actually playing and practicing a lot of these combos. Like, I'm familiar with the Right Changer combo that can actually potentially OTK like a Dragon's Y deck out of nowhere, or a Plague deck that finally had its center broken open. But the Satsuki deck, when I first started messing around with that, had just come out with its first wave of support, was slow as hell, and was getting absolutely destroyed by my friend's Dimension EX Star Dragon build. So I actually just kind of gave up on the deck, and from everything that I keep seeing, because I am also the admin and creator of the HeroGirl Facebook group, that a lot of people are still looking for help with the Satsuki build because they want to try and get it going. The furthest I've seen is Casablanca is the new size 3 that just came out this past regional weekend. It's something to the effect of call cost, pay gauge, and put a crew trooper from your field into its soul. And then when it's as a counter skill, you can call out a crew trooper from its soul without paying its cost. Then you bounce it to your hand as the skill resolves, or something like that. And it's something to the I can't remember how the exact sequencing works, but I do remember when the card was previewed, someone mentioned that you could put a Casablanca into its soul from field, so you have a Casablanca inside your Casablanca dog. You go ahead, use the counter skill, you bounce it back to your hand. I don't think it's a named ability, so you can go ahead and use the skill of the second Casablanca, and then something to do with maybe a Casablanca in the solo Satsuki. It's a lot of theory crafting that I have had literally zero experience with firsthand, and something I might look into after I get to a place where I'm happy with my Frill deck. But right now, Battleship is actually just the furthest thing from my mind. I've kept up with almost none of the support outside of what my Sword Boyfriend got me. I don't even have I don't even have Overturned Satsukis or the Double R that came in that same set with her.
Actually, I remember that ExaltedEin, you also play Satsuki.
This is true. I actually won a regional tournament with Satsuki when she came out.
Yeah, he's the guy that you would want to talk to about Satsuki.
Yes. What would you talk about in regards to the Satsuki aggressive combo?
The new the thing is, I haven't had a whole lot of time simply because with the regional, I was focused very heavily on Plague.
Fair enough.
And so a lot of I didn't have actually time. I picked up 3 Casablanca and one of the promo, which is really good card, by the way. But
yeah.
I didn't even read Casablanca. I was just like, okay, I'm going to pick these up because I know in about 2 or 3 weeks, when I get some downtime after building my Ein deck, that this is what I'm going to be looking at. So I'll
probably help you with it during our next tournament day or next Monday, I guess.
Yeah, I'm down. I've got some ideas for it. I know that what I've seen, anyways, is people will call normal Satsuki, grab cards from drop, put them on into Soul. You can use all crews battle station 1, pull them out, call overturn Satsuki, get some attacks in, use Casablanca as well in that combo, and then overturn after. You can get a bunch of attacks out that way. I've seen some, I haven't seen it, but I've been thinking about quite a few things because I really do like Satsuki. I haven't really found a way to effectively use the overturn yet for myself, because I found that even though I had overturned Satsuki, I just preferred normal Satsuki for the consistency and the defensive capability, because I play that
fair
deck
enough.
a lot more defensive than a lot of people.
Mhm.
But yeah, like Satsuki is one of the decks that I'm quite interested in seeing how it progresses. I hope beyond the X series that it does get support going forward, because it's one of those decks that isn't complete in my mind. Like in my mind, Chaos and Thunder Empire are complete decks. Like you putting more stuff under their banners isn't going to help them very much, unless a while from now you give them some extra cards like they're doing right now with Thunder Demons, Ein, and Zwei. That makes sense. I don't think that you should ever go 2 years without giving direct support to a deck, but at the same time, putting too much more into Chaos or Thunder Empire right now is not a good idea. In my mind, anyways. The Baal, Drum, and Bots thing, I don't really consider that the same way, because it's kind of trying to do a completely different build.
Yeah.
With the amount of power that each of those decks have, I don't think they really need a whole lot of focus for support right now.
Okay. What I basically said was that what I thought about the aggressive combo was something along the lines of like, if you really want to cheese it, you can play 100 max General Chaos Braden for just one more attack, but it didn't seem right to me. I think since the maximum number of attacks you can have is 19 before final phase, and most of that is command mech, I really don't think that you need really too much. I think also Casablanca is a better defensive card than she is an offensive card. But that's neither here nor there. Yeah, my main issue with Casablanca is that you need to call her on top of something, and that's not really easy to do when you're trying to overturn, which is when that's your biggest burst damage period. So like you set up for this one turn and then overturn and just rush face for 19 attacks and 30 something critical.
That sounds impressive. I'd have to see it in action, because I can't really. I guess just the way that I play Satsuki, I can't kind of visualize that playstyle. But I'm definitely interested in taking a look. Yeah. I don't know if I'd run that playstyle, because to me, it almost sounds, if you're building up to a turn like that, you're going to be focusing on that as your main win condition, which can often lead to decks being more glass cannon-y.
Yep, I can understand that feeling.
And as proved with my Plague deck, I prefer a bit more control over my options.
Yeah. So thankfully, Satsuki's gotten enough support that I think you can have control over options. Prepare for Sortie is one big one, for example.
Oh, yes. Prepare for Sortie is great.
And then Impact Canceller to just add more cards to Soul. That is also great. Like, I think there's just ways to do it, but it really depends on how you play it and who you face and what your personal play style is.
Well, for sure. I think every deck should be tailored more to the personal play style of the person running it. Because there's certain cards that I'll run that you won't really run the same way. Like when I showed you my Satsuki first time, there was quite a few defensive spells that I was running that you weren't.
I don't think anyone can play things the same way that he plays.
He has in which one?
TNS.
Oh, yeah, just the way I play?
Yeah, I don't think anyone plays cards the same way.
Well, I kind of want to ask, in what context?
I don't know. Like, you like your versatility built into the deck, because like I've run decks that you've made for me before to try out, just to get the ball rolling. And there's a lot of decision tree. There are a lot of decision trees in your builds where, if this is the matchup, you go A, then B. Whereas if you're going against this matchup, then you're actually going to start with C and then slowly work your way backwards into X, is what it feels like every time I try one. Whereas someone like me, I prefer a much more streamlined and dedicated deck where the versatility comes from the cards themselves rather than the deck.
Yeah. Okay. I guess I can see that. I'm going to blame part of that for maining Magic World, where I feel like I have to do that in some sort of way if I want to be able to answer everything, because other than that, I just feel like I'm behind on something. I guess, okay, maybe not Magic World then. I'm just thinking about it. Maybe it's just me in itself in regards to my playstyle. Just like,
yeah,
I really hate feeling like, oh, after this matchup and I have no chance to win. I really hate that.
Right, and like I feel the same way as far as, you know, a matchup is part of what makes really aggressive and consistent OTK decks like Thunder Empire when that first came out and all this other stuff. It gets frustrating for me in that same way too. However, I'm coming from the mentality of it's not that I have answers, but it's that I'm trying to kill you so fast that you have to have answers. So anything in my deck has to be geared towards that singular goal and anything that could potentially disrupt it as a general blanket. Kind of like when we started putting 3 copies of the Spell Null into my deck rather than just the 2. Because the only thing that could really stop the combo rush plays were shields.
Mm-hmm.
And that one spell just happens to have the flexibility to play well against something like Plague if they're all in on Pandemic.
Yep, I know all about that.
It's also, you know, part of the reason why I love cards like I'm a Rose that cuts that evil. It's something that has been in both versions of the deck. Like the version of Frills that we built for regionals this year is fundamentally different than the one that we built last year in terms of sequencing, right? Because before our main concern was trying to tear down chaos, just chaos, because they hadn't started branching out at that point yet. So it starts going into kind of a boomerang formation where we want to go ahead and punch through the center with as much penetrate as possible. So that means I'm playing boomerangs to fix numbers. It means I'm playing Informal Frill. And, you know, because they always seem to have like that one shield to just barely keep Gear God on the field, I'm a Rose that cuts down evil ends up becoming like that one last attack you need to make sure that Gear God is off the field. But then there are also matchups where the card itself, you know, you just have to use it a little differently. And, you know, against something like, I don't know, 100 Demons, where you're playing with some of the smaller stuff and you're link attacking, I can go ahead and play it and counterattack and potentially ruin your combo setup by killing off one of the Yamageto eggs or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, it's still kind of that in the current build, but it's really more like a Spell Null 4 and 5, because we're using it to restand Vantage in case, you know, he got shielded from that first attack, and because they weren't expecting to have to deal with Vantage again, now he's able to just clear their board because they don't have that secondary shield.
Yeah, and that's why we talked about putting it in last moment, right?
Right, that's why we talked about it last moment. That's why I did mention that I want to include. And it's interesting to me that now that I've had a chance to see a couple of the other decks that are being sold but were updated with China, that other people felt the same way. Like, that's the kind of flexibility I like having in my cards rather than just the deck itself.
We definitely went to a different topic than I had planned, but that's completely fine.
Yeah, wasn't the main topic supposed to be, like, how do we relax from card games or something?
Yes. Well, I mean, like, we might as well go on for that. If we're just, like, right after a regional, I'm pretty sure none of us are playing card games immediately afterwards, right?
I mean, you guys aren't, but that's because you guys had so much more prep time going into it. But for me, this is actually kicking me off to getting into a lot more play time because now I'm, you know, motivated to do better than I did the last time.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. But basically, like, when it's your off time from card games, what do you do? Like, what do you do just to relax?
Well, the first thing I do is I make sure I don't play card games for, I don't know, 9-10 months.
That's not me.
I mean, 9-10 months seems like an adequate break time.
for me, a break is like a week. But then again, I work full time and I use card games as my night out to go relax because it gives me something else to focus on that's not a life priority.
Cool. So basically, for you, card games are the relaxing part.
Yeah. And,
Okay.
I can definitely understand what HeroGirl is saying because last year, after the regionals, I made day 2 for Vanguard, and I was actually going to switch over to Buddy Fight. However, I left my Hades Falls at home for my Oni Assassin deck, so I ended up playing Vanguard. And after I got knocked out of Vanguard, top 12 there, or whatever it was, I was sitting around watching the Buddy Fight regionals, and it just made me really pumped to want to play Buddy Fight.
Ah.
And then, of course, nobody shows up that week, so I go out there myself, and I sit around for an hour, and then realize, oh yeah, everybody just went through regionals, so nobody's here. So I, head home and then come out the week after, and that's when I start getting into Buddy Fight again. Because before that, I played originally during like season 1. I was playing Magic World, kind of like you, an Asmodee, but it was at the time it wasn't 72 Pillars and Wizards. It was just all Magic World.
Oh man, yep, I remember that.
And
we had no gauge cards.
Yeah, you just kind of did what you could and go from there. And I won a couple tournaments with Magic World, and I really enjoyed it. And then I got into Katana World, and I liked the deception aspect. The idea that you make your opponent not sure of what they want to do. Anytime that you can influence your opponent by not actually doing anything directly to them is an interesting concept to me. So that's why
the mind games.
I love the mind games. So that's what got me to come back was I saw Oni Assassins, and I saw their main concept was mind games, and I was like, that's the deck I want to play.
Welcome to Katana World.
I love it.
For me, it really depends on where I placed and where I finished. Part of the reason why I'm so motivated to do a lot more playtesting is because of how poorly I personally did that last regional. If it was something more along the lines of like when I top 4 Weiss at Nats a couple of years ago, or when I top 4 Indy last year, I'd be a lot more content to just kind of sit on my laurels for about a week, maybe 2, if I'm feeling, just that much more tired or relieved, and be like, okay, we got like our best version of the deck out there. We did it. Let's go ahead. We'll take a breather, and then get back at it after a while. Because I did do less than exceptional at this past event, I almost immediately have to start thinking, okay, what were the things that we're having issues with? How are we going to fix the gauge issues? What are we going to cut for that? How do we keep room for like all the roses and the hypers, but also enough shields to make sure that we live through all these rush turns? And what are we going to do about all this crazy ass life gain? There's just, if there's a puzzle that's in front of me, I can't not try to solve it right there and then. Especially
that sounds so familiar. Oh my god.
Especially when it's involving my own personal performance. I need to figure it out. Anything short of top 4 or even honestly, even just that last event would have been fine if I had felt like I had fought tooth and nail and had a shot. But the problem was I was fighting tooth and nail when I was out of practice and the deck was severely undertuned and undertested, and I didn't really have a shot so much as I just kind of wasn't dying. Stupid plague decks. No offense.
Oh no, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, it's just there's puzzles in front of me and I need to solve them. But if I get to a point where I feel like I did solve them, I just maybe made some bad plays and I'll just have to do better next time, then there's nothing to work on. So I'll just take a breather until I, start getting experimental again.
Makes sense. All I know is that the day after regionals, I slept for 13 hours.
The day after regional, I flew for 14 hours.
Oh man. Anyways, to to those that made it this far, thank you very much for listening. And next week, we're going to discuss a really interesting topic regarding buddy fight. How do you build your sideboard?
Oh.
What drives you to build your sideboard the way you do?
Clearly, you just include all the cards you couldn't fit into the deck to begin with.
And that's not how I do it. So, I mean, this is definitely something I think we'll be discussing a lot more in detail next time. Anyways, I'd like to thank HeroGirl and ExaltedEin for showing up. None of our regulars could make it this time, but I guess that's fine. Let's see. Yeah, let's go with it again. Like if you like this video, click subscribe if you really liked it, and see y'all next time. Insert blooper reel.
Bye.